In this Kotlin on Android development tutorial, we're going to show you how to stream video using a MediaPlayer with a SurfaceView. Welcome to Mobile Application Tutorials. My name's Nigel. Okay, so we'll get into it and start creating our application with the MediaPlayer using the SurfaceView. Okay, so go to your Android Studio, start a new Android project, and I'll call this MediaPlayer Streaming App. Select Next. I'm just going to keep the defaults on Android 23, the marshmallow. Select empty activity and just keep the defaults for the main activity. And we'll just wait for that to build. Application's now built. First thing I want to do is to go into my Android manifest file. And I want to add some permissions here. And we'll add the internet one first. Because we're streaming from the internet, we do need internet permission. And we'll add another one, which is the awake clock. And so this stops our application from going to sleep when we're playing a video. Okay, next step here is to go into my layout under resource, layout, activity main. Okay, I'm going to change the constraint layout just to a linear layout. It's a bit easier just to code for that. Oops. And inside my linear layout, I do need to set the orientation to vertical. And we can now remove this text view, which is the hello world. And it's going to be very similar to what we did in the previous tutorial with the video view. So I'm just going to set up a frame layout as a container, put my surface inside that. We're using a surface this time for the MediaPlayer, and we'll also have a progress bar inside that for the top portion, the player portion of the application. So we'll use a frame layout. And the width will be match parent, and the height will be the wrap content. And I'll just set up an ID for that. And I'll just call it surface container. And inside the frame layout, we'll set up a surface view. And again, the width is going to be match parent and the height is going to be wrap content. And with the surface view, I need an ID as well. And I'll just call this surface view. Okay, and we're also going to put a progress bar because we're streaming video, it takes time to prepare it to do the buffering and the rendering and all that. So we'll display the progress bar while that's happening. So progress bar. Wrap the content for both of those. Set the ID for that to this progress bar. And I'll set the visibility of that to invisible initially. We will enable that. And it's a good idea to set the gravity for that center so it shows up in the middle of the video itself. Okay, that should be all we need to do for our frame layout. The next step is we're just going to populate the rest of our application just with a text view displaying some text. That's just a demonstration. You could put your own web view, another video, a map, whatever, but this is just a demonstration of how to fill out the rest of the application. I'll have that contained in a scrolling view, just so we can scroll the text view. And the width will be match parent, and the height will be wrap content. Okay, and inside that scroll view, I'm going to put a text view. And make the width match parent and the height wrap content. And we'll add some text to our text view. What happened there? And it's going to be a string. We're going to put it in the string folder. And I'll just call this lipsum. Just represent lipsum text. Now we'll have to actually populate that. I'm using a Mac, so I can just press Alt-Enter. And let's try that again. Press Alt-Enter on that. And we'll create a string value for our resource. I am using a Mac. And I'm just going to bump across to my browser. Go on lipsum here. Select some default text, copy that, go back to Android Studio, and paste that in there, select OK. Okay, these should be the only changes we need to make to our layout. And now we'll move across to our main activity. Okay, we're going to create some variables for this. First one will be the media player itself, media player object. And I'm going to need to use a late init for this because we're going to initialize this at a later stage. We can only create our media player once the surface view has been created, and we'll need to set up a callback for that, which we'll do a little bit later on. So I'll just call this media player. And it's of the type media player. And I'm also going to create another variable here for the playback position. And this will be of the vat type. It will be a variable where we can change the contents of this, and we'll call it playback position. We'll set it with a default value of 0, so we're inferring the type of an int. And finally, I need to put in the real-time streaming protocol address. So that's going to be a value. Doesn't need to change, not for the purposes of this tutorial. And I'll call this real-time SP URL. Okay, and we're going to use the Bugs Bunny for this, and so I'll just go across to my website here, because I can't remember the address of Bugs Bunny. So I'm just going to copy the contents inside speech marks here, copy that, go back to Android Studio and paste that inside there. Okay, so we've got all those three set up for ourselves. Next step is we need to wait until our surface view is created. So we basically implement a holder for that. So go into your main activity next to, and just here, we'll call the surface holder. And callback, and we will need to implement those callbacks. And we will select all of these, select OK. Okay, I'm not going to do anything to surface changed, so I can just remove that to do, or surface destroyed, not for the purposes of this tutorial. But surface created is yes, we're going to work with that. So I'm just going to give this parameter something more recognizable. I'll just call it holder. And at this stage, we're going to implement the functionality, or call the functionality a little bit later on, where we do the setup and the preparation for our MediaPlayer, but we'll do that a little bit later on. So while we're here, we'll just set up our lifecycle methods. This is just tidying up, so we're going to set up the on pause and the on stop. So I'll just put this on below. So I'll do on pause first. So on pause is the place where I want to save the playback position. So we'll call playback position equals MediaPlayer dot current position. And that should be the only thing we need to do for on pause. Now we'll do on stop. And inside on stop, we'll need to stop the player. And because we're stopping, we could be leaving the application, well, we'll need to release the player as well. Those only changes are going to make to the lifecycle methods here of when we're actually leaving the application. Now we'll do the setup phase of the MediaPlayer. So we'll move from idle into the initialized state. Very first thing I want to do here is to create a audio attributes just to set up audio for our MediaPlayer. So I'm going to create a function for that. I'll make it a private function, and we'll do create audio attributes, and it's going to return an audio attributes object. We'll need to create a member inside there. I'll just call this builder, and if we call the audio attributes builder, and we're going to set up a couple of values for this for the set usage. For the set usage is usage of type media, we're playing media. And the set content type is going to be, oops. Set content type will be the content type of the movie. We want to play the movie. Okay, now we can return that. Call the builder. Typing's falling apart. Build. So we need to build that builder that we created, and that will return the audio object back from the function. Okay, now we can do the setup for the MediaPlayer. So I'm going to create a new function for that. Private function. We'll call setup MediaPlayer. And we will be passing down the surface to that, this one here. That'll be an initialized surface that we get from the onCreated callback. Okay, first thing I want to do here is to call our progress bar and set the visibility to visible. Now I'm going to create the MediaPlayer. Remember, that was a late limit object that we were working on. Okay, once that's created, we can now set the surface view, the initialized surface view, to that MediaPlayer. So call MediaPlayer. Set surface with the parameter, argument parameter. Okay, we've now set the surface. We might as well set our audio. So we'll create a member here for audio attributes. Create audio attributes, and now we can set that to the MediaPlayer. Set audio attributes with audio attributes variable that we created. Okay, now let's work on our URI. So let's create a value for our URI. And we will need to format that via calling pass with the real-time variable that we set up there. And now we can set that URI to our media player. So we'll call the media player. Set data source will be what we're calling here. We need to pass in the activity itself and then the URI. And one final step here, it's good to put a harness around this, exception harness, just to catch it if anything goes wrong. Let's try and catch. This will be an illegal argument exception. We just want to get notified if something does go wrong there. Okay, and we might as well call the media player. It gets called from inside the surface created. So I'll create a value here to get our surface first from the holder. We should just be calling surface, which represents get surface. This should be okay. I'm just going to remove the question mark there, because it will be providing us there, or else the it will be failing basically. Okay, now we can call setup media player with the surface. Okay, and so once we call the setup media player, we move from the idle state in the media player across to the initialized state. But there's one more state where we want to get from initialized across to prepared, where we can start playing the media. So we need to set up the prepared state. And in the prepared state's when the buffering and the rendering of the video actually happens. So we'll set up a function for that. And I'll just call it prepare media player. And what we'll do is we'll call the media player. Prepare. Notice there's at the very top of the list here, we've got two prepare functions to use. Make sure you use the prepare async. What happens is once you call this, you'll return straight back to the application, but the actual preparation is going to happen in the background, so it's not going to affect the running of the application. So we'll call that. Now just let me check the documentation for that, just in case I need to put a trap harness around it. And notice here it says for streams you should call prepare async, which returns immediately, as I just said. And it does throw an illegal state exception if it's called an illegal state. So basically we should be in the initialized state to be able to call this. So we'll put a trap harness around that. I'll try catch and change that to a legal state exception and just get notified of that. Okay, so we've called prepare async, so we're telling it to start buffering and getting the video rendered for us, but how do we know when it's completed? We use a listener. So we'll call media player again, and we'll just set on prepared listener. And notice at the top there, I'm going to use the Kotlin implementation for that. So this will notify us when we're prepared, and the buffering and the rendering is completed, and we're in a position to play the video. So once we're ready to play the video, we can turn off the progress bar, or make it invisible. We'll call the media player. I'm going to call seek2, so we're going to set the start location of where we want to play the video, just in case we left the application and came back. Notice how we did set up a playback position for that, where we do set that if we do leave the application. So we'll put the playback position here. And now we can call a media player start. Okay, that's fine for that, but you'll notice when you start playing the video from this stage here, the sizing of the video could be all out of whack, because basically we just set to wrap the height of the video just to let me explain what I mean. If we go to the activity main and we look at the surface view, it's wrap content, but we don't yet know the actual dimensions of that height. So we need to get the width and the height of the video and then reset those values with the proper aspect ratio to our surface view. So first thing I want to do is to get the width and the height of the video, we need to set up another listener for that. So we'll do that down here. It's called MediaPlayer. Set on video size change listener, and I'll use the Kotlin implementation for that. I'm just going to change this to player, and this to width, and this to height. Okay, once this gets called, we'll get called with the width and the height of the video. We can now put those values into our surface view. These values here might not be the actual desired width and the height, but the aspect ratio is what we want from there. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is to create a new function underneath here where we actually do the resizing of the surface view. So just underneath, oh actually let me just put it up here so I can put it in the middle of the screen. So I call it private, and I'll just call it set surface dimensions. And it's going to take the, I'll just call it player, and it will be, anyway, don't forget to put the fun for function inside that, and we'll call it MediaPlayer, and we'll take another width, which will be the type int, and the height again of the type int. Okay, the first thing we want to do is just to check that the width and the height are bigger than 0. So this might get called sometimes at the very beginning with no width or height, so we don't need to do anything for that. So if width is bigger than 0 and height is bigger than 0. Yep. So we want those two conditions to be met before we're actually going to change the height of our dimensions of our surface view. Okay, now we can start on the surface view. I'm going to set up a value here to represent the aspect ratio of the video, and I'll call that aspect ratio. And aspect ratio is going to be the height, and because we're doing what you can think of as the result of this is going to return a float, so we're going to need to convert for this operation our width and our height, which are supplied to us as ints. So we need to, for this mathematical operation to work, we need to convert them to floats. But kindly enough, Kotlin does give us these two extension functions where for this operation we can convert our ints to a float. So we'll have an aspect ratio there. Now the next thing I want to do is to get our screen width and our screen height. The width of the player is going to be the screen width, and the height is going to be the actual aspect ratio height. So what I need to do here is just to get screen dimensions. So I'll set up a value for that first. Screen, not screen. Screen dimensions equals, and this is going to be what we call an object point, which holds two values, an x and a y, to represent the height and the width. Now I'm going to do a call to the window manager. Kotlin supplies us window manager, get default display, get size, so we can pass our point into this, which is screen dimensions, and they will get populated with the screen width and screen height. Okay, now I'm going to put in my desired surface width, create a value for that. And it will be the screen dimensions, the value x, which represents height. Now I'll do the same for the aspect ratio height, so it will be surface, we'll call it surface height. Ooh. Put some braces around here because the value here is going to be a float, and surface height we're going to need it to be an int. So I'm just going to put some braces around here, and then we'll call our width again, and then multiply that by the aspect ratio just to get the proper aspect ratio height. So it's got screen dimensions. Actually, we'll call surface width just to make more sense. And then we'll pass an aspect ratio. The result of this is going to be a float, so we will need to reconvert it back to an int using the Kotlin extension. Very handy, these. Oh, I said int, didn't I? Okay, so we've now got our desired surface width and the heights that we want to set to the surface view. So we'll set that to the surface view, but these need to be put into as a layout parameter object. So I'll create a new value to represent the layout parameter, and I'll just call it params. And these live in a frame layout. If you look at the layout file, and we'll call the layout parameters for that, and we just pass in the surface width and the height. Now we can set those parameters of the type layout parameters to our surface view. So we'll just call the surface view layout params equals our params. And once that's finally done, we can now set our MediaPlayer display with the surface view. I will create a value here to represent the holder for our surface view. So I'll just call it holder, representing surface holder equals surface view holder. And now we can call our MediaPlayer set display with the holder. Okay, and that should be all we need to do for that. Now we do need to call this function from inside the listener that we created there, because the listener is what actually gives us the player with the width. Let me just change it. We might as well use the player here. So we'll go down into the video size change listener, and we'll call it our set surface dimensions. Pass in the player, the width, and the height. Okay. And that's all we should need to do for the prepare media player, but we do need to call the prepare media player. So we'll go into where the surface holder is created, just here, and it's called prepare media player. And finally, this is one more step we need to make, and that's to add our surface callback to our surface, and we'll do that in the onCreate. And so first of all, I need to get a value for my surface holder, so I'll call it holder equals surface view holder, and then from that we can call our holder add callback, and it's this object because we're implementing it in the activity up here. Okay, I'll just put a line underneath that. Okay, now let's try running this and see if we can get the video playing. Okay, so we now successfully have the video playing, and there was a tiny little bit of buffering happening there. And as you can see, I've got my little scrollable text view, but you can put any view you want underneath there. Important thing here is we've set the aspect ratio of this image. Can I reduce that volume? Yes, I can. And so we've set the aspect ratio of the height matching the width of the screen, which is what we set up in that function. And that concludes this episode of the MediaPlayer streaming using a SurfaceView. Compared to the previous video where we used the video view, there was a significant amount more of coding that we had to do for this, because the video view just sits on top, an easy wrapper to the MediaPlayer. Whereas for actually implementing the MediaPlayer, especially using a SurfaceView, we needed to add a listener for that SurfaceView, and then we had to work with the proper various states for the MediaPlayer, such as getting it into from idle state into initialized state by calling setupPlayer, and then from initialized state into prepared state by doing the preparation and calling prepare async. And we also had to work with the dimensions of the video itself. We had to set up a listener to get the video dimensions back to us, where we could reset the appropriate height and the width while maintaining the aspect ratio for our video. Anyway, that concludes this video. If you want to get notified of the other videos I'm working on, don't forget to subscribe to me on YouTube. And also, if you do need to get in contact with me, YouTube comments is not the right place to ask a question, because as you can imagine, I get received tens of thousands of questions. Could spend several lifetimes reading them. So you can either get my professional help from Code Mentor or directly from this website. I've set up an initial free 10-minute consultation call where if you've got work or you want me to help teach you Android or Kotlin on Android, if you've got small development projects you're working on, I'm happy to support you for those at a cost, of course. Anyway, thank you for taking the time for watching this one. Bye for now.